Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to Free Thought Hour. So poor Tercia, she's sick again. I don't know what she's done to deserve this, but anyway, luckily, from South Africa, we've got Dean, he's been in our audience many times, but today I've invited him into the studio. Dean, how the devil are you?
I'm good. How are you, John?
Good, good. Well,
Thanks for
welcome.
having me.
Welcome from South Africa. Yes. And in true international form, our guest today is from America, North America, Chicago. Welcome, Aldo. How the devil are you?
I am doing well. Excited to be here.
Good, good, good. Yeah. So let me just set the scene for us a bit, because I sort of bumped into Aldo in social media. This is where I get most of our guests from, and I can never
Is that a Freudian slip, John?
Yeah, definitely. Yes, that's right. Yeah. But I can never remember, because I'm always trawling, sort of fishing for potential guests. And so I can never remember where it is I bumped into the person when they come on the show. So Aldo, where do you haunt? Is it Facebook or Twitter or what?
You would have found me on Facebook, but I couldn't tell you exactly what group, because I'm involved with several. There are a lot of atheist-theist groups, but also history groups, or so I suspect it might have been in an atheist-theist.
Yeah, that's most likely. Yeah. So I spotted you there, and I thought, this guy sounds interesting, because he's obviously clued up in some respect. It might have been we were talking about evolution or something, or I don't know, the origin of life, or something like that. And I thought, I'd like to get him on the show. And because I've been in France, I haven't had very good connectivity in this part of France where my son lives. So, and we'd had a dropout, one of our guests, because normally we scheduled guests 2 or 3 weeks in advance, you see. But we'd had a dropout last week. One of the people that we'd recruited suddenly changed his mind, and we had to use up our recorded show earlier than we anticipated. So that left this slot. And of course, next week, this is full disclosure, next week, we've got Matt Dillahunty as the guest. So
how did you pull that off?
You'll have heard that name, won't you? So watch next week's show to see us chat with him. But where was I? Oh yeah. So I was back home from France, a bit tired because of the long drive that we were just talking about before the show went live. And I thought, I'll just make one last effort to see if I can get somebody for tonight. And in fact, I just finished editing the Global Atheist News, which is one of our other shows. Don't know whether you've watched Global Atheist News, but this is a show I do on my own. And so I'm presenting the news in as dispassionate way as I can, because it's religious news. And so it's difficult for me to keep a deadpan face sometimes when I'm reporting. Exactly. I'm reporting this ludicrous stuff. And I mean, if you've just missed it, it's just been streamed, the latest edition of Global Atheist News, but you can watch it. Obviously, it's still up. So, and at the end of that show, I usually pre-announce this show, because the Global Atheist News goes out at 8 o'clock here, and the Freethought Hour is at 8:30. So I ended Global Atheist News today saying, we haven't got a guest. And that was before Aldo kindly accepted my invitation. So I'm going to correct that error that I broadcast in Global Atheist News and welcome Aldo. So what is your thing, Aldo? Why did I discover you? Is it evolution? What is it?
it could be well evolution, but let's understand that that's also irrevocably linked with atheism and theism, because
Yeah.
the only difference between the two, or we could look at um, the two as answering attempts to answer main
Yeah.
existential questions,
Yeah.
which are, where did I come from and where did everything else come from?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we're looking at the human evolution, or the origin of life, and the origin of the universe. And that's where I see the conflict between atheism and theism, that one is saying a God did everything,
Yep.
a God created the universe and a God created life, while the atheist point of view is, at least from my vision, is that this can be explained by science. We didn't know before. We don't get Darwin till 165 years ago,
Yep.
and we don't get the Big Bang Theory till less than 100 years ago.
Yep.
So what I feel, I feel the attachment humanity has to theism. A lot of atheists say, how can you think like that if, and I'll say it, we were educated with science. Nobody, even in theocracies, nobody is going to school and learning something other than science. They might be forced to learn religion alongside with it, but then they aren't learning religion. They're learning the specific religion of the theocracy. It isn't like, well, you can choose.
Yeah. Yeah.
A government is saying, this is our religion. We all have to believe this. And we're going to, because we have to live in reality, we're going to teach you science also. But let's keep separate in our minds that there's a reality that we have to live in, but then there's also this, I don't even know what to call it, but this, I don't know if it's this insurance against the end of existence. That is to say, I'm not really going to be dead forever. I'm going to live in heaven or in hell, because you live forever in either one. The basic premise of religion is you never die. Even if no matter what sin you committed, you're still living forever. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's the joy of religion for theists.
Yeah.
Live forever. And if I forget to acknowledge God at my moment of death, okay, I'm going to hell forever. But if I remember, I'm going to go up to heaven.
So I want to interrupt you there, because you've been talking about origins, and I want to know your origin, because Aldo Pedroso. Now that's a name that comes from somewhere, isn't it? I mean, what is the?
No, it came from nowhere. Absolutely nowhere. Just totally made up. All names come from somewhere. My name, Aldo, you guys are, well, one European, one South African. Aldo's Italian. I was named for my father. My father was named for an Italian poet, Aldo Veroni. My parents were Cuban. They came to the U.S. pre-Castro. Pre-Castro. Okay. My dad was a doctor. He had practiced for a year and simply wasn't making money in the Cuba of that time. He needed to have a connection, perhaps be the son of a doctor to work at the major hospital. What he and others of that time thought, I'm going to go to the U.S., I'm going to get more training, save up some money, and then go back to Cuba and maybe create my own clinic, something like that.
Yeah.
When I'm born, my dad is making like $25 US a week as a doctor. He has a room that he can fit my mother in, but they didn't expect me. And within about 2 days of being born, I get sent back to Cuba to live with my paternal grandmother until I was 3, by which time my parents have settled in Chicago.
Yep.
I come to Chicago. I don't know how much you want to get into me. I mean, I don't know.
It's an interesting story, but surely coming from Italian extraction, you ought to have been.
Wait, no Italian extraction, just the Italian name. My parents are Cuban. My great grandfather was a patriot. You can find him on Wikipedia in the Cuban it's the Cuban War of Revolution, which is the Cuban Spanish War.
Yep.
For some reason, they call it the Cuban American War or something. It wasn't. The Americans got in. 3 wars were fought in different decades to get Cuban independence, which was in the late 1890s.
Okay.
6 months before the end of that conflict, the U.S. blows up their own ship in Havana Harbor as an excuse to get involved in the war, and the peace treaty gets signed with the U.S., not with Cuba. Now, what I notice is that colonial powers don't tend to return freedom to the people they colonized. They hand it over to the next colonial power. So when Spain started collapsing as a international power, well, they lost Cuba, they lost the Philippines, and another international power, the U.S., steps in. I understand, for example, Britain, and I don't know your view of Britain, but as I understand it, pretty much all of Europe was pretty much weakened after World War I. The only country that put an effort into developing a military was Germany.
Yeah.
But the other countries who had fought a war, nobody wants to fight a war, they didn't really prepare for one.
We didn't want another war after World War I.
Nobody wanted another war.
So,
but
can I? This is very interesting. I didn't know any of this Cuban history stuff, but I just want to get Dean involved because although I'm going to be victimized here, aren't I? Because I'm the representative of the colonial power.
I was about to say, John, that
repressed both of you.
A couple of centuries ago, Britain was going, it's a nice country you have there. It would be a pity if anything happened to it.
It'd be a shame, yes, it wouldn't it? And that's very Chicago, of course.
Well, I'm not going to critique England for being England. You're just people. And I think it was a set of circumstances that basically England, which had to become a naval power because it's an island, happens to become a naval power when we can start circumventing the globe. And if you can become a naval power when you're circumventing the globe, pretty much any place you go to can become a colony. If you have the technology to get there, you have more technology than the people who are there.
Yes, that's right. That's all it needed. A good ship and ideally better guns, which we had, of course, at the time, and Bibles, because Bibles are a great colonizing weapon.
Well,
no, this is actually, I have to pipe in here, because this seems to be a very universal theme where colonizers not only come, like John said, with new technology, but they also come with a new religion. And the same thing happened here in South Africa as well. The Dutch firstly, and then the British came, and the legacy that they leave behind with this religion that they import is still felt today. The local, there's no population more religious than the local indigenous people. Yeah. And I'm sure that Aldo can also relate to I've heard that Hispanic people in Latin America are super religious, super Catholic, and super religious.
Yeah.
So I'm very interested to hear your take on it.
Were you RC originally, Aldo?
I beg your pardon?
Were you RC, Roman Catholic, originally?
Well, my parents were Roman Catholic. I
Mm-hmm.
I really couldn't believe it, and I'll explain exactly why. It might be a bit different, or perhaps difficult, not knowing American culture. But I go to church. My parents take me to church on Sunday, and what the priest is saying sounds to me like what I'm watching on TV Saturday morning, which are cartoons.
Yes.
I don't know if in South Africa or Britain they have Wile E. Coyote and Roadrunner.
Yes.
We know the Wile E. Coyote.
Oh, okay, good. So a boulder falls on Wile E. Coyote and he's smashed flat, right?
Yes.
And then in the next frame, he's normal.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Resurrection.
Yes.
That's resurrection. And so I go to church, I come back, hey, he's doing it too. He's doing it too. Roadrunner is trying to escape and he runs across water, right?
Yes, yes.
Who do we know that does that? You know? So
the same themes permeate any good story, don't they? I mean, if you want a ripping yarn, you want a few particular tropes in it. It's got to have a virgin birth, a resurrection, walking on water, doing a few more miracles, healing the dead, all that sort of thing.
All this took me to a conclusion that, hey, look, this would be a lot easier to swallow if we had miracles now. But why are all these incredible miracles happen like 2,000 years back, and then it just stopped? And so I made this arrangement because I'll tell you, even as a child, I knew, okay, lying is wrong. That's one of a very basic. I can explain a million different ways why lying is wrong. I'm gonna have my first communion, and I'm terrified. I'm gonna have to get up in front of all these people and swear that I believe this.
Yeah.
And it was just agonizing. And I ultimately came to the conclusion. I mean, I'm trying to work this out. I come to the conclusion. If God wants me to believe, wanted us to believe, then he'd be doing those miracles now.
Yeah.
When I see a miracle, then I will believe. Now, I won't follow the guy. And back then, I didn't know about the Old Testament. I didn't read. And when I did read it and I was an adult, I didn't read all of it. I'm reading through it. Are you crazy? Yeah, I mean, it is insane. It is. I say, who are these people? Who even? I don't think the most primitive people would be doing this. I mean, this is what happened. Lots and all that crap. But the village comes to rape the angels that came. Not even his daughters. First, they came to rape the angels. And Lot offers his daughters. What father would do that? Are you kidding me? And then wait a minute. Forget the turning the wife into salt just because she don't.
Yes.
I gotta think. I'm whatever era this is, the whole town aflame. There's no TV. These people, hey, that's something. I'm never gonna see this again in life. Why wouldn't I look? I mean, I would get up out of bed in the morning to see the Red Sea split. That is impressive. You're gonna do something like that. She turns around and looks, and boom. So, but what really gets me is the two daughters. Both of them want to bang their dad.
Yes.
Who thinks like that? It never happens. A father might want to go for the daughters, but when the hell do the daughters ever go?
No, right?
It's just weird, isn't it? Absolutely.
Oh my God,
for me, it all fell apart after I read about Mudman and Ribwoman in the garden with the talking snake.
Yeah.
And the following zoo boat and all of that. It fell apart for me because I was just thinking to myself, if you can believe this, if you can believe that is literal, that actually happened, what will you not believe? That's the question that I ask. Because if you can make yourself believe that, then nothing's off the table, really.
Yeah.
So, you know, miracles, not a problem.
What
People
puzzles
walking on
me?
water, not a problem.
Yeah,
You know, resurrecting zombies and
yeah, yeah.
not a problem, you know.
What
But
puzzles
you know,
me with
don't ask them about Muhammad flying to heaven on a winged horse. That's horseshit. How can you believe something so stupid as that? You know, it's
what puzzles me about the Garden of Eden story is why he needed Adam's rib to make Eve. I mean, had he run out of mud?
It doesn't, I mean, you don't even have to get the people for it not to make sense.
No.
Because what does he do day one? Isn't it the heaven and the earth?
Yeah.
So since he doesn't make light until the third day, he makes it, but he can't see it?
Well, there's no days, is there, without light? So how can you count?
Oh, you know, I had that argument recently. Didn't he say on day one, and then on day two, and then on day three? So he's marking days.
Yes.
And he's speaking to us. That's another thing. People tell me, well, you don't really understand God. If I started speaking Spanish, or you started speaking, it's called Afrikaner?
Yes, Afrikaans.
Could I expect you to understand me, or could you expect me to understand you? No. So if God wants to speak to us, he needs to speak in a language that we understand. Yes. What's all this? Oh, you didn't understand it.
Yes. And it shouldn't be difficult for a person who can create a universe. He
gave us instincts. Why didn't he just make an instinct to believe in him?
Yes.
It's the simplest of things. You're making instincts. Why you make an instinct so that I believe in you? I got to read a book. Now look how long we had people and how long we've had books. And then from that book that they wrote 2,000 years ago, how long until we got a printing press?
Yeah.
Right.
You know, it doesn't make sense as a form of communication for God to say, let's write a book.
Yeah. You know, it always reminds me of that, I saw this illustrated cartoon where you know, in the first frame, the guy stands and he says, I am God's prophet. And then in the second frame, the people he's standing amongst ask, what is God saying? And then in the last frame, it says, give God's prophet money.
Yes. Yeah, they always want money.
That's
and it's difficult to see
it's crazy.
Why can't God make his own money? It's
small
beer compared to starting a universe.
I have an interesting take on this, John. Why was it good enough for God to appear to all these people? He had no problem. People saw, heard the voice of God. They saw the works of God. They encountered living prophets, you know, and then all of a sudden it's just radio silence.
Yes.
It's almost like at some stage where people got a little bit more enlightened and connected. It was more difficult to sell this kind of a yarn to the common folk because people were thinking about, like, really? But it's strange. I never get it. And it's what's that quote? I think it was Darwin or someone who mentioned the indelible mark of our lowly origins. Was, I think, I don't remember the exact wording. Well, but the same thing applies to religion as well. You know, like you can see. It's like sausages. When you learn how they're made, you very soon lose your taste for them altogether.
Well, that is true. One, that's psychological. We like how it tastes. We do eat sausages, but then once we get into thinking what they're made of, all of a sudden we don't like them, which has nothing to do with how they taste or how nutritious they are. So I see it as psychological.
Yeah.
I also see as psychological because, and I'm sure you guys are the same, you see something you don't understand and you ask why, you know, you think about it. So I think about, well, wait a minute. the whole planet has pretty much the education that I have. You know, they might have a different view to it, but the information is there, and if they're interested, they have it. Moreover, they went to school, so they have some, and we all got the same education. If I went to China and they translated whatever science book they had, they could teach me from that. It's not any different, same as math.
Well, except that in some parts of the world, some factions of our population are being deprived of education, aren't they? I'm thinking of Afghanistan, where if you're female, you can't have an education.
Yeah,
that's fine, but then I have to look at Afghanistan and say, what kind of education are the guys getting?
Yeah, well, they're getting.
It can't be some overwhelming education, and the women's nothing. But moreover, you know why I'm okay with that? Because no society can say, I'm not going to function with 50% of my population, and I'm going to be able to keep up with other countries. It isn't sustainable.
That can happen,
Yeah.
You know, in my opinion. Also, we're talking about, you know, I need to say, we seem to be focused on Christianity, but 85% of the planet is theist. So it isn't something that went away when Christ went away. 85% are theists now with the same information that we have, and they decided to believe in a God. Now, I don't know. I mean, I try to point out, because you have these events in the Bible, and you know, you really have to say, well, this is impossible. I mean, if you had enough water to cover the earth, it would crush it like an eggshell. So that's a physical impossibility.
But on that note, there is not enough water in existence to cover the entire planet.
That's why it just gets so, you know, if you go on, it would crush the earth. Where did that water come from? Where did it go afterwards? You know, it just doesn't, you know, you almost can't stop to make it make sense. I mean, it has like too many errors. It isn't one error. It's just like continuous errors. You listen to, you know, to the story. What, we're all products of incest. We all came from Adam and Eve.
Yes.
You know, that isn't enough. We would have like eyes in our foreheads, and you know,
But what is the cause of this? You know, is it that we as a species are just so deeply uncomfortable with uncertainty that a bad explanation is preferable to no explanation at all?
Well,
what is the root of this?
Well, consider, you know, what I said earlier. You only have 165 years since Darwin. And even if you had Darwin, you're still one. There are people alive today that cannot give any other explanation. When they were born, they could not give any other explanation other than God did it for the universe, because we don't have a Big Bang. So if we didn't have the Big Bang, what would you think? How would that the universe came into existence?
Well, I think Dean's come up with a very good question there. Why do we accept a bad explanation? Are we so desperate for an explanation that we'll take anything rather than have doubt?
Let me ask you this.
Okay.
In 1859, what was a good explanation?
It was God.
See,
God did it.
You need a good explanation before you can say that's a bad explanation, because in 1859, God was the only explanation.
Yes, that's true. Yeah. But we've become more critical thinkers since then.
We have, you know, I was reading, I think it was in 2020, and half of what we know, we learned since 2010. So due to computers and communication, our knowledge and AI, I mean, I can only consider what things are going to be like at the end of this century. We've expanded knowledge so much more quickly. But do people change that quickly?
No,
Now,
no.
I need to, in attempting to understand things, I mean, things I look at as, well, how did we get patrimony? How did we get misogyny? How did that, and it's all over. So I have to say, this is a natural process. I don't personally don't like it, but how did it occur? And if it happened everywhere, then I don't see how it could not happen. Humanity didn't come up with another method. Same thing with religion. What early civilization arose without religion? So I see we need a religion. I mean, I might be criticizing it now, but for us to get here, we needed to go through that.
Yeah, see where you're coming from. That's a good idea. So I wanted to say that it reflects the experience of every human to start out as a child knowing nothing, pretty much, and looking for information to parents and elders, So that's a habit that we get into, seeking an authority to educate us, to help us. And therefore, it's comforting to have such a figure to, look after us. And when we grow up and our parents die, there is only him up there to take on that role for us. It's a comfort thing. It's a sort of adult teddy bear.
Yeah. It's true. You know what I wish I learned as a child? I wish that I was taught as a child that doubt and uncertainty were my friends.
Yes.
Because it's only within doubt and uncertainty that I open that avenue of learning, of looking for answers, of discovering new ideas and learning new things.
Yes.
And certainty and having, being told, especially from a position of authority that might not even be an authority in the first place.
Yeah.
When that person imprints on you that questioning, doubting, asking uncomfortable questions, those things are not acceptable or not deemed honorable. It imprints on you as a child this idea that you have to accept just what is fed to you from an authoritative source. And in steps religion into that void, and they assert this authority out of nowhere on the back of this false premise that
that's right.
Well, God did everything. Who created the trees? God did it. Who created the mountains? God did it. Who created the wind? God did it. What about cancer? That's the devil.
Yes. So if we've been trained to be sheep from very young, then of course anybody can step in and become our shepherd.
Exactly. They are unscrupulous. They power hungry. They're greedy. You can simply Google crazy African pastor and you will see you'll see examples of these people exploiting.
Yes.
And they're living in disgusting wealth. They're living in disgusting wealth that they earn off the backs of people who live in shanty towns in absolute squalor. And these unscrupulous people will go and milk them every single weekend to fund their lavish lifestyle. And look, I'm a capitalist myself. I don't begrudge anybody earning a living, but to do it in that fashion, they have no shame. They have absolutely no shame whatsoever. I call them pulpit bandits. That's what they are. They're just out there highway robbing people every single weekend, and it galls me to no extent.
Yeah, some of them are so shameless about it. They've even adopted a name which tells us what they're at. There's Creflo Dollar, isn't there? That's a clue.
Creflo Dollar. He's an American preacher.
Yes.
Well, I don't listen to. I don't even pick up. I don't have enough of an interest to know American preachers. Period. They just don't bring anything to the conversation, and most seem pretty extreme. I mean, I'm only seeing clips on theist group, but then they put on some preacher who's like screaming or like sort of getting very excited. I'm just gonna say, I think, like what has happened, the reason why we have theism is that it's a human reaction. If you have 30,000 years of theism, humans aren't gonna, kick it away overnight. It's just gonna be a question. I just see that as the reality. I mean, I would think, hey, why do you need to believe this? But apparently you do. So it just means that I don't understand why, but the reality is that you do. So this is just how long it takes. I might need to research the why of that, but I already understand the reality of that. People need this. Now,
except that it's now dwindling faster thanks to the internet and shows like this, isn't it?
Communication. I think, even if they don't agree with me, I'm talking to some kid in Nigeria or something who's, like Muslim, and we're debating, but he's at least hearing another point of view. And he's responding, so he had to think about what I said and then respond. So I think if I bring up, well, why? Because a lot of, my question, why did this happen, or why would he do this, or does this even make sense to you? This process, because you will find a lot of Christians. I mean, we seem to be picking on Christians. And my view is, well, it's all theism. You just happen to, they're like 4,000 gods. You pick your favorite, fine. I really don't care. Somebody gave an explanation for the origin of the universe and life. I think Odin split this golden egg or something, or no, he might have split a this ox-like creature, I forget the name, in half. Everybody has had their methodology, but none of it is real, because none of it relates to what can actually happen. There wasn't some humongous ox in space and Odin came and split it in half, and then they all are, fail the test of reality. For lack of a better word.
Yeah. So I've got one South African word, Dean.
Go for it.
Yeah, it's unkulunkulu. No, unkulunkulu.
It's pronounced unkulunkulu, and it means inkulu means great. So unkulunkulu means the greatest of the great.
Yeah. It's the god of the Zulus, I understand.
Yeah, it's not necessarily I'm by no means an expert on isiZulu tradition or whatever, but as I understand it from my lived experience, this is simply the name that has been slapped onto the Christian God. It's a term. It's basically a term of reverence that comes from within the culture for, like I said, it means greatest of the great. So it's a term of reverence. But there's a lot of different names, and if you look at pre-colonial society, there's also a very rich tapestry of traditional religions, traditional spirituality, and everything that has been simply whitewashed. It was, as soon as the Dutch and the English set foot on the African continent, they sought to eradicate anything that was traditional. And funnily enough, there's a movement nowadays, and I don't know how I feel about it, but there's a movement, especially among young Africans, to recapture that traditional essence, and people are looking for those lost roots and trying to just identify with some kind of ethnic identity.
Yes.
Because even though the culture and the tradition is there, and I'm sure that it's the same, where Aldo is. There is, people who've been disenfranchised by a colonial power They always have this yearning to rediscover their identity and their roots. And it's very, and the thing that concerns me though is that it also carries a bit of baggage. It has a lot of superstition and supernatural thinking, which can also go in the wrong direction if you put enough fuel on that fire. It also goes into this blaze of superstition and witch hunting and all of those things. So
we should have left that stuff behind a century or more ago.
Well, I don't see how you can escape it, because they're linked. I mean, the reason you have these traditions that people are going back is because you have these beliefs. It's interesting. I just want to bring this up, and then you can continue, John. But ancient civilizations, when say the Sumerians or whatever, they conquered like another culture. They adopted the gods of that other culture. They didn't want to change gods because they felt that it was easier to control that other culture if they kept their own gods.
Yeah,
you can keep your gods, but you're our slaves. And people say that's cool because all the good God stuff is after I die anyway. I don't mind.
Yeah.
My ass off.
That's fascinating. Very interesting.
Yeah. So that's sort of reverse.
Right, it's reverse.
Colonization.
I would have done the same thing. If this is what's uniting these people, this can be a focal point to respond to this.
Well, in Europe, when that happened, when Roman Catholicism took over from the Roman Empire, what they did, they didn't say we're going to adopt your local religion. They said our religion fits with your religion. That's why we're going to celebrate your spring festival that you called what was it, the oyster. We're going to call it Easter, and that's when our God was crucified. And we're going to adopt your Saturnalia and call it Christmas, and so that it was just plagiarized, really. And
it was. I saw it as, I don't even want to say what I said. I said you're blatantly stealing their religion to use it. You're weaponizing their religion against them. That's how
that's right. Yeah. So surely that makes it all obviously human culture rather than actual factual phenomena, doesn't it?
Now that you bring out the facts, that was the other thing. The way Christians speak, the way I see it is either the Bible is fact, in which case you have to believe it all, the miracles and everything, and if it isn't fact, then it could be a recipe for brownies, for all we know, it could be anything. No, I mean, that's why I see it, because Christians seem to feel that, okay, this part is the flooding or whatever. Well, this is just symbolic.
Yeah.
It didn't really happen. But the crucifixion, that really happened. And the resurrection, that really happened, I'm saying.
So how do you distinguish the myth from the so-called history? The history,
right? Like, what's the test? That's the thing. That's what I never get about biblical literalists either. These people who are like the 6,000 years ago, God said poof, and mud man, rib woman, and the talking snake in the garden, and all of that. That's literally true. I don't get those people. I really don't, because
it might have me once. That's it. I have
no
reason to believe you again.
What is the test? How do you tell what is fantasy and what is reality? Because we can look at the book and we can find places. Yeah, okay, well, that's where that city was. Yeah. Those people existed. Egypt is real. So we get that.
There's the ruins of Jericho. Yeah.
But where do you draw the line? What's where's the miracle and what's the test?
Did you guys see
your personal incredulity?
Did you guys see
where does the line drawn?
Did you guys see the movie 1918?
I haven't.
No.
It
was that's about the different translations of the Bible and when they decided.
No, I'm sorry. It was this film done by this director Nolan about World War One, and you have these two soldiers that need to go from wherever they are across enemy lines to get to an attack that the British are going to launch, but it's a trap. So these two guys are sent to tell them don't launch this attack, and all their trials and tribulations getting to this place. My point was that didn't really happen in World War One. Those two guys weren't sent out to stop this. It was just a movie. So it's sort of the same thing. Now, some things, there really was a World War One. There really was a biplane, because I saw a biplane there. But the moment that if somebody says, is that what happened in World War One? I'm saying, no, that didn't happen. Very realistic, but it didn't happen.
Well, there's really
a book that's telling me all this stuff that may very well have happened. I mean, I am perfectly willing to accept that some Jewish carpenter prophet actually named Jesus actually existed. I have no problem with that. And the Romans nailed so many up on their rows that they look like signs. They look like, so I have no issue believing that Jewish carpenter was the son of an entity that created the universe and life. Now that's a stretch.
Yes, that is a stretch. Yeah.
Exactly. That's putting Superman and Iron Man in 1919.
Yeah. So right? there is a New York, but that doesn't mean Spider-Man's real.
If you lie to me once in that book, if you tell me an untruth, as far as I'm concerned, why should I believe anything else? How did this lie get in here? And the book is full of them. You cannot read one page. I mean, it's almost astounding how you could get that much BS in one, in one, how many pages is it?
Yeah, it's a masterpiece, really, isn't it?
Look at it anymore. I'm literally almost afraid to look at it anymore because there's not one true thing in here. It's astounding. It's almost a work of art in that respect.
The worst thing about it at the moment in your country, Aldo, is that it's being used to influence an election.
Yeah.
This is what I would say, it's a democracy. So I can criticize how another person gets to the conclusions they get to regarding their vote. Moreover, I can understand people that want religion, and for them to have the religion they want, they have to have some laws in place. But of course, those laws wouldn't just affect them. It affects all these other people who don't believe in their religion, which is the problem. But we can't take the vote away from them because we don't like how they think. That's sort of how democracy works.
You do have a secular constitution. It is supposed to be separated, church and state, in your country.
I thought that the U.S. could. I looked at, or in reading of World War II, you sort of wonder, well, how did Hitler get into power?
Yeah.
And then looking at the situation, their constitution said you needed a 50% majority. And that makes sense. That sounds democratic to me. But they didn't get a 50% majority in 5 elections. So you have chaos.
Yes.
And Hitler gets chosen. Now, I see that there's no way you can know, but you live and die. Countries live and die on their constitutions.
Yes.
So the U.S. has a constitution. It's been around for 250 years. And maybe it's run its course, just like Germany, that it self-destructs and gets into a position they can't get out of with all its power, with all its money, with all its influence.
Yeah. Do you see that happening? Are you worried?
I'm not worried. I'm old as hell, So, and really, the world would have to fail for it to affect me.
That's so charming. I'm old as hell. I ain't worried about shit.
My kids, I'm worried about. But as I was telling someone earlier today, my son graduates from college. I tell him that You don't have any responsibilities. I mean, you don't even have like a job. So till about 30, you can just explore as much as you want. Do whatever you want, work a job, advance, but you're not tied to a job. You're not tied to a marriage and kids, Explore the world while you don't have those responsibilities, because once you do, it's going to be much, much more difficult. And so he takes off. He bikes Europe. I said that was the graduation from college gift was, you can go, I'll fly you wherever you want, and etc. So he gets his bike. He loves biking, and he bikes Europe. He's through France.
Just pedal bike or a
pedal bike. So I know. Now I lived in Europe 11 years. And he knows it. He sort of comprehending what that is. He's gone and said, I can do it. I could live. So I'm not worried about him because he doesn't have to live in the U.S. Now, this is the thing, and I'm discussing it with, people now. I don't work. I'm retired. And if you divide the U.S. debt by the individuals in the country, me, who doesn't work, owe $105,000. The people who are working owe $270,000. This raises after the real estate crash of 2008, where you had banks, and the question is this bank too big to fail, and the government has to do something that it wouldn't normally do, but hey, realistically, we have to survive, so they had to do it.
Yes.
The U.S. is big to fail. If the U.S. fails, will the rest of the world say, hey, we can't have that? The U.S. right now is in a position that we can't let it fail. And so they support it economically.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's going to happen or if the world wants that. I just don't know.
No, it was Gordon Brown who was responsible for as much as anybody, our Prime Minister of the time. Gordon Brown.
Oh, okay.
He organized the leaders of the major countries of the world to get out of that 2008 crash. So I'm going to take the credit for that.
Well, the U.S. lied to other countries. I mean, I would have put the boot on their neck right then. You lied to us. They wrapped up their bad loans with good ones.
Yes.
And then once you unravel it, say, hey, there's all this crap here that we wouldn't accept. They wrapped up their as I understand it, loans have different grades. You have an A, a B, a C, a D.
Yes.
And so an A is, hey, look, you're guaranteed to get, almost like you're guaranteed to get your money back. Well, they're mixing these D's. Right.
Yes,
and I don't know how it looked there, but I'm saying this doesn't make any sense. They're giving loans, home loans, to people who no friggin' way they can pay it back.
Yeah.
They're paying they have these loans that are structured that you really don't have to pay. You only pay maybe the interest the first 7 years.
Yes.
So you think, oh wow, this is cheap. But after 7 years, you need to pay back all that you would have paid before.
Yes.
You're paying back the capital and the interest on what you would have. So it's not like you're really paying anything less. You're just paying less up front. But your salary isn't going to increase to the level in 7 years, unless your salary doubles.
Yes.
And is that realistic? You're not going to be able to pay that loan. So you're going to default. Now you have thousands, tens of thousands of loans defaulting. Yeah. What happens to the country? Which is what happened to the U.S.
Yep. Yeah.
But so, I mean, this, I'm always, especially being from Africa, I'm always, I'm torn with this conflict between, we have this principle in Africa called Ubuntu. It's a very ingrained into our social structure. It's a form of socialism, but it's more like on a cultural level. And, Africans especially gravitate towards socialism and communism. If you look at the African countries, like Angola, Mozambique, all of those, they have I mean, I'm aware of that, at least, that have had some influence with communism, because it appeals to that that socialist nature in us, you know. And then I love living in a capitalist society. I'm just going to put that out there. But inherently, this goes against everything that I consider as fair and equitable and good for everybody. It's not egalitarian. It's completely individualized. You know, like the greedier I am, the better I am at this. The more money I make, the better off I will be. And I don't know if there's there's, especially if you look at European countries, there's this what they call social democrat. Democrat? I don't know what you even label it, but it's like a fusion of socialism and democracy, where countries, for example, like the Scandinavian countries, are very good at this, like Sweden, Denmark, Norway, those countries. And the state is there to form a buffer for people in terms of health, welfare. Those people will never be forced to, live in absolute poverty and whatever, But but where do we draw the line? The question that I have exactly is like, where do we draw the line between having that buffer that the socialism? Because if you say socialism to an American audience, you are evil incarnate. They don't want to even hear that word.
But let's recognize the reality of America is that it has a lot of socialist policies. I mean, we have public schools, if I just start listing everything that's public and paid for by governments, libraries, education, at least elementary education, it's a little ridiculous that free education stops there. And then at the college level, university level, it isn't. On the contrary, it's one of the most expensive, in the world. And I think that given that a country benefits by having an educated populace, it just makes sense to make that as accessible as possible to everyone. One thing I want to say, you mentioned Mozambique and Angola. If you recall, those countries were colonies that Cuba, a communist country, came and liberated.
Yes.
So I would think they would have a socialist, communist influence.
Those two countries were colonized by the Portuguese. So the Portuguese colonized Angola, and as well as Mozambique, and I think there's another country. My African history is very bad, so I'm not exactly sure.
Well, those two, who liberated them from this influence?
The communists.
The communists. So what, they're saying, hey, you're my savior. I believe in your system.
Yes.
Yeah.
Moreover, how I saw the Cold War. I don't know, because you have these major protagonists, Russia and the U.S., is that, for example, Cuba. Cuba has a revolution. Now, Russia is on the other side of the world. The U.S. is 90 miles. It makes sense for Cuba to trade with the U.S. Cuba does go to the U.S. They meet with, Castro meets with Nixon, who happens to be, and they're meeting in New York because there's this big meeting of the UN. And as Castro is going, he said, he communicates with them. I'd like to meet with you. We just had this revolution and we need funding. We need money to rebuild the country. Makes all the sense in the world. He meets with Nixon and Nixon says, well, we'll give you $25 billion, which works out to about $2.50 per person. Now you can imagine $2.50 might get you lunch. So it's really, I see it more as an insult. It's like my house burned down. I said, well, look, I got 1,000 here for you. Here, take this 1,000. As if, what am I going to do? Buy a nice tent? So, but who comes to the UN is also Khrushchev.
Yeah.
Now, Castro just had this revolution. He knows the US isn't crazy about him.
Yep.
So he goes to Khrushchev. Khrushchev is dying to have a base 90 miles from the U.S. because the U.S. has a base on its border in Turkey.
Yes.
So they send off the missiles, and the U.S. starts freaking out. You can't have these missiles here, kind of thing. They say, fine, take out the missiles from Turkey. And Kennedy says, politically, I can't do that. But if you give me a year, I can quietly pull them out. Nobody will pay attention. I won't tell anybody. I'll just pull out the missiles. I'll pull them out, but don't, do that. And the Russians agree, and Kennedy does that. Afterwards, when I'm seeing that Cuba is going to Angola, Cuba's going to Mozambique, and the U.S. isn't doing anything. What makes sense to me is they signed a treaty saying they can't do anything. That the Russians said, we're sending those nukes here because of the Bay of Pigs. You attacked them, and they need defense. And the U.S., to get the missiles out, said, we promise. They signed some kind of treaty that we're never going to see, but they promised they would never attack Cuba.
Well, I don't know. I don't know how valid that is. But guys, exciting though this conversation is,
very interesting indeed.
I know. Yeah, we've done an hour. And I have to keep to the rule, I'm afraid, because I can't have shows that go on and on, because I'll never get another guest because they'll think they're going to be trapped.
End the show. But I'm talking about us three.
Well, we could all meet again and do it another time, couldn't we?
Yeah,
we can certainly do that.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, guys, thank you very much. You have been
very enjoyable.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I enjoyed meeting you. Nice meeting you, Aldo.
Meeting you, Dean. Look forward to talking to you again.
Yeah.
Me too.
Absolutely. So,
and great, John.
Say bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Hope